In Frostgrave 2nd edition, you take on the role of one wizard, attempting to gain riches and power in the ruins of a frostbitten city. Now, this is made by Joseph A. McCulloch of Silver Bayonet fame, at least for this channel, and it's published by Osprey. Not a surprise on that one. Now, is this game just Silver Bayonet with a different flavour, like a bit of a wizardy stuff? No, it's not. It's got its own special something, which we'll go over right now. Well, here we are, my stalwart companion. So, since we're walking into this hellhole, do you have a name or something that you should go by? I don't go by a name, I'm just the Sigilist. Yes, we're here to find... I mean, that's not a name though, dude. That's a school. Treasure, magic items, and all that fancy stuff. And you can keep all the swords and other crap. I'll keep all the useless scrolls and books. But here it is, Felstad, never more of a wretched hive of scum and villainy. Did you steal that? That sounds familiar. I mean, didn't someone else say that? Somewhere. Look, I don't know, okay? Yeah, no, I mean, So the setting in Frostgrave is pretty much a standard style of fantasy setting, but it's set in the frozen city of Felstad. And you take on one of the 10 wizard schools, who all have opinions of the other 9 schools. You know, some schools are mortal enemies, others are friendly, and, some just don't really give a crap about each other. Now, these schools themselves, the actual schools, don't really have much in the way of the story, as your wizards pretty much acting alone in their search for power, but they do come from these wizarding schools. Now, the goal of your wizard is really whatever you want to make it. As it is a narrative game that is pretty much pushed forward by players. Somewhat like a game of D&D without a DM, so it's sort of like a narrative-based joint project. Each scenario has a lead-in, but otherwise it's up to you why one of your wizards might care about this. So you have plenty of control over what the setting contains at this point. Obviously, wizards are real, ruined city in a snowy hellhole. But other than that, it's pretty much up to you. What happened to the city? Why are the wizards there? Is there some kind of master in the old city? Well, that's up to you. Frostgrave is pretty straightforward in what you need, which is great. So, of course, you'll need miniatures. You'll need at least 10 per person. So that's great. Terrain, of course. You'll need quite a bit of this. Tape measure, so general wargaming stuff. Now, you also need dice, but you only need 1d20 per player. So that's fun though. And then you need 5 treasure tokens. So that's pretty straightforward. I just pay in some of these things gold. Done and dusted. You of course need your wizard's sheet, which is just your warband information. And I also recommend a pencil and an eraser. Now you'll also of course want to have a copy of the rules. So Rennie, if you can show the rule book here, that's an important part of the game. Now, I know that some of you might be thinking, why don't you have a physical rulebook in your hand, Vamps? Basically, if I owned a physical rulebook for every game that I've got, my house would give out. So, that's why I generally do digital rules at the moment, because I have a lot of paper rulebooks as well, so... Okay, so I'll probably a small little box down here for this section. We're going to do building a wizard and a warband. Alright, let's get step 1 of our warband going. So, first we have to make our wizard. So our wizard is pretty straightforward. Our wizard starts off by picking one of these 10 schools of magic. We've got chronomancers, time wizards who control the speed of units, either buffing them or nerfing opponents, as well as sort of just some general movement abilities such as moving through walls and stuff like that, so pretty cool stuff. We've got elementalists. These guys basically deal with attacking magic in elemental form. You can pick whatever element you want, it really doesn't make any difference. Then we have enchanters after that, which of course deal with buffing items as well as creating constructs. They can be permanent members of the warband, and they can even make temporary buffs that they give permanent by the end of the game. Illusionists, these guys are all about battlefield control, making units hard to hit, distracting enemies, moving treasure tokens around, and they can even make fake units, so that's pretty cool. They also have the really cool blink and teleport spells, which are great. Necromancers deal with undead. They have 2 temporary summoned units, which aren't great, but they have some really strong attacking magic as well as life-draining abilities. So fantastic. Sigilists, they're all about knowledge. they write scrolls, and they absorb knowledge to level faster. They also have some dangerous trap spells based on the form of runes. The Soothsayer covers a lot of outside of game ability, such as improving initiative rolls, and as well as on the board being able to see through the tricks that other wizards can use, basically. The Summoner is all about summoning demons, but has some interesting movement abilities, as well as a pretty good buff and debuff spells. The Thaumaturge is all about holy magic, adding defensive buffs, healing, and being able to dispel other forms of magic, so that's pretty cool. And then finally we have the Witch, who's a good mix of the other schools, and they can also brew potions and control animals and summon animal companions. So they've got some decent stuff, and they've even got a poison bolt attack, which poison's an interesting little ability. So once you've picked out your school, you then get to choose your spells. So you get 3 from your chosen school, you get 1 from each of the aligned schools, and 2 from the neutral schools. These spells from the neutral schools cannot be from the same school, or from any of the aligned school, or your chosen school. Now, as you continue on the game, you can learn spells from any schools, from grimoires, except for your opposed school, which you can't learn ever. Now, let's make a example guy. So we'll make Greg. Greg's a Sigilist. He's the nerdiest of all wizards. Your name's Greg? It's Greg! What a shit show! I prefer to go as the Sigilist. Man, that is fantastic. I mean, I don't even have a name yet because Vamps didn't give me one, but shit, it's gotta be better than Greg. Stop with the Greg crap, man. No, I'm paying your bills, right? Like, shit. Greg picks Absorb Knowledge, Write Scroll, and Explosive Rune. So, now each one of them has a number that needs to be rolled or beaten to cast the spell. And whatever the number is in the spell section in the rulebook. So Write Scroll needs a 12, so that's what Greg needs to be able to Write Scroll. 12, right? Then he picks 3 spells from Aligned School. 1 from his Aligned Schools, 1 each. So they're Enchanter, Illusionist, and Thaumaturge. So Greg picks Heal, Teleport, and Animate Construct. Now, because they're not his primary school, he adds 2 to the difficulty roll of these spells. So Teleport, that would normally be 12 for an Illusionist, becomes a 14 for Greg the Sigilist. Finally, he picks 2 spells from the remaining schools, and Greg decides to take Brew Potion from Witch and Bone Dart from Necromancer. Now, because these are neutral schools, you add 4 the difficulty roll, so Brew Potion, which would be a 12 for a Witch, is a 16 for old Greggy Pants here. Now, finally, Greg cannot take any Summoner spells because they're smelly and weird, basically. Greg finishes up by grabbing his starting stat line for the Wizard, and he can pick up to 5 items from the gear section. It's free and only limited by the unit's carrying capacity. For the Wizards, it's 5, and they cannot take any armor from here, as it stops the magic from working. They're nerds, they've got to wear their nerd outfits, so bam, done. Greg also gets a stipend from his Wizard Guild, 400 crowns, to leave them alone and hopefully go die in a blizzard. Now, Greg can spend this however he likes on members of his warband, and I should probably mention this, only wizards level up in this game. Everyone else is pretty much worth as much gold as you pay for them, unless they have magic items, of course. So if one of them drops dead, you just replace them. Now, I personally recommend you start your warband out with an apprentice. So an apprentice is a worse version of the wizard. In fact, they only get stronger when the wizard does. Otherwise, they are functionally exactly like the wizard with 1 less item slot. When we get to turn order, you'll understand why I and the game suggest that you have an apprentice. Now, so at the start of the game, apprentice costs 100 gold, but become dearer as wizards level up, which there is a formula. Then you can pick soldiers, so you can get up to 10 people in your warband, so 8 soldiers. Now, you have 6 standard soldiers to pick from and 9 specialist soldiers to choose from. Warbands can only have 4 specialists, though, so it's important to pick wisely on those guys. Now that we're at that point, the standard guys, let's have a sticky beak at them, shall we? So we'll go in order of worth. So we start with the free guys, thugs and thieves. Thugs are better fighters, but don't resist spells very well. Thieves are faster, but worse fighters, and they have standard spell resistance. Warhounds are next. You pay 10 gold crowns for them. They're very fast, not very good at fighting and resisting spells, and can't pick up treasures, but they are fast, so they can tie people up in combat. The next one are infantrymen at 50 gold coins and men-at-arms at 75 gold coins. Now, these are roughly the same. Infantry hit harder because they have two-handed weapons. Men-at-arms have high defense and spell resistance, which is why they're more expensive. And then finally we have the Apothecary, 75 gold coins as well. These guys can't fight for crap, but they got very good spell resistance, and they start with a healing potion that heals 5 health. And they can also feed other people other potions as well. So if you pick up some more potions, the Apothecary can kind of dole them out as needed. So that's pretty cool. Now we'll move on to our specialist guys. So we've got the Archer and the Crossbowman, both at 75 gold. Both function the same as ranged attackers, 24-inch range. Crossbows hit hard with +2 damage, but need to be reloaded. Bows don't. That's the difference. Treasure Hunter is a bit of a thief mixed with an infantryman, speedy and a good fighter, worth 100 gold. And then we've also got the Tracker for 100 gold, which is like an archer mixed with a thief, speedy and shooty. Then we have the close combat guys of our group, the Knight and the Templar, at 125 gold each. These guys are monsters in close combat. The Knight has a higher defense, but the Templar deals more damage with a two-handed weapon. Next to the Ranger and the Marksman, 125 gold each. These guys are more of the all-round version of the Archer and the Crossbowman, respectively, able to fight in close combat and shoot. The Ranger has thief speed, but the Marksman has the men-at-arms defense, so, you know, And then finally, to round out, we have the Barbarian, which rounds out our group of special operations. These guys have the combat of the Templar, but have the Apothecary's resistance, making them a rather dangerous opponent for wizards, but, you know, with standard defense, they can be picked off rather easily by some other units. And that is all of the guys that you can recruit in this particular section. So, if we go back to our example, Greg takes his apprentice Tim with him, as well as fighting a Barbarian on the road, hiring a tracker and men-at-arms from the surrounding villages, and then he runs into a group of vagabonds on the road consisting of 2 thieves and 3 thugs. He dazzles them with tales of the riches in the Frosty City and takes them with him. Greg is now ready to take on the Frozen City. I mean, look at these idiots. Look at what we've got here. How the hell are we going to make this work? Well, I will admit they're not the greatest group of companions, but you know, you work with what you have. So setup. Setup for Frostgrave is pretty straightforward. You roll a scenario, or make one up, and then you place terrain based on the scenario's description, roll to see who goes first, they get to pick their table side, you get a 3-inch deployment zone as long as you're not within 6 inches of the corners of the table, and the other player gets the opposing side, and you set up miniatures at the same time. You then place down the treasure tokens, 1 in the center and 4 others surrounding the treasure tokens, at least 8 inches away from the central token, and at least 6 inches away from each other. And that's it, you're ready to roll. So the turns are as followed. We have a wizard phase, an apprentice phase, and then the soldier phase, and finally, creature phase. So the wizard phase starts pretty easily. The wizard activates, and then he picks up to 3 other miniatures within 3 inches of him to activate. So in this scenario, Necros could do his activation as well as Araxis and then 2 of his other skeleton buddies. Now, the apprentice cannot activate during this phase, even if he's right near the wizard. And then once you've activated your wizard and they go off and they do their stuff, the opponent activates their wizard. So we'll say these guys go off and do some general necromancy stuff. Now, we have the apprentice phase, and the same thing happens. You activate your apprentice, and he chooses up to 3 miniatures within 3. Now, in this particular scenario, he only has 1 guy near him, so he only moves 1 guy. And then these guys go off and they do their actions as well. Now, obviously, during this apprentice phase, you cannot move figures that have already moved. So let's just say Araxis was in range because he moved with Necros. Well, guess what? He can't during Caster's phase because he's already moved. The apprentice doesn't get to reactivate people. And of course then the opponent has his apprentice phase, and then finally we have the soldier phase, which is our leftover soldiers. And they go and do their action, then our opponent does it, and then finally, last but not least, we have our creature phase, where our creature goes off and does his random things. Now, of course, this is done by the AI, very similar to Silver Bayonet, so generally they will move and charge the closest enemy that they can find. If they have a ranged attack, they will do that while they close range, and that's basically how the monsters act. Now, some special scenarios may have special rules about how these monsters act, but generally this is how they act. And then once everyone's moved, you re-roll initiative for the next phase, whatever that may be, which turns out to be pretty bad. Much worse than this guy's. Okay guys, so now it's your turn. Your wizard activates with their buddies, and I mean, what can you do? Well, each model gets 2 actions a turn, just like Silver Bayonet. A move action and a regular action. Move actions come in 2 flavors. You can regular move, which is whatever your movement. So for our infantryman here, he can move 6 inches. Boom. Now he can also do a double move, which you may think that means he gets to move 12, but no, it's like a sprint, a dash. He gets to move half again, so he can move an additional 3 inches. You can also swim, climb, and jump with move actions as well. Climbing's pretty straightforward. You just climb as much move as you've got. Jump and swim are a bit different and have some more complicated rules. Like Silver Bayonet, you can also choose to reload a crossbow with a move action as well. So, but you can also reload it with a regular action. Regular actions cover pretty much everything else on the board. So fighting, shooting, searching, picking up treasures, and spell casting are all regular actions. Searching and picking up treasures are pretty much in the same style of action. Searching will involve rolling a dice and getting a number. That may or may not be good. And then picking up treasure is simply, you just say you pick up the treasure when you're within an inch of it, and your guy is now carrying it. However, once you've got your filthy lucre, you can only move half speed, so keep that in mind. Spellcasting. I was planning to actually save this one for last, but out of the 3, it's the least complicated. So your wizard and apprentice can cast spells. You declare that you'll cast a spell, and then you'll roll a dice. If your casting number is over, then the spell is cast. If you roll under, depending on how much you roll under, you may take damage. However, you can choose to empower your spell after the roll, and you sack HP to raise the number to whatever it needs. So let's just say our friend Max, the summoner here, would like to cast Scattershot. He needs a 14 because it's not of his school. So he rolls his dice, and he gets an 11. So he's still short. Now, because he's within 5 of the failure rate, he won't take any damage for failing to cast the spell. So that's not a terrible thing. Now, if you wanted to, he could sacrifice 3 health now and successfully cast the spell, which in that case he would get to use the Scattershot spell. And yes, you can remove yourself from a game by sacking too much health. Quick wizard, we're losing the fight, do something! It's imperative that I cast this spell. I will pour all my essence into it. No one will be able to prevent me from casting the all-powerful explosive rune. There are a few items that let you do this. For example, here has a Staff of Power, and Max himself actually has an Orb of Power. So both of them enable you to sack health without sacking health. Now that being said, you can't sack health to raise the dice above an 18. So for example here, Max could change this result to an 18 by sacking 7 health. But he can't sack any more than that. He can't raise it above an 18. And that also includes with these other ones. For example, if Max used his Orb of Power as well as sacrificed health, he still couldn't go above an 18. And then if the spell cast successfully, you simply follow the instructions of that spell. Nothing too crazy on that one. You know, if the spell debuffs, it could be resisted by the target. And they will simply roll a dice and add their will score to it. And if they beat the casting roll, they will resist it. So, for example, let's take One Eye here. And he's being a bit of a douche over here. And the witch, Seraphina, doesn't like his douchebaggery. So she casts a curse on him. So she casts the dice. And she gets a 16, which is enough to successfully curse. She only needed a 12, it being a witch spell. Now, our friend here can resist it if he wishes, which he gets a +1 towards, so let's see how he would have done on that one. No, terrible. He got a 2 total, which means he doesn't resist the curse, he is cursed. Now, for example, let's just say he rolled a 19. Well, no harm is done to him. He resists the spell. It's that straightforward. Some other spells may also have cumulative will rolls, which I think Curse is one of them. So, for example, if after my guy moves next and he does his stuff, he may then try to resist the curse. And this time he rolls an 18, which would be enough to resist the casting of 16. It would be enough to basically resist most castings, actually. And that's pretty much how that would work. Now, you can also, of course, do attacking spells. For example, Necros here has Bone Dart, but I'll explain that in the shooting phase, because pretty much he cast the spell, which he only needs a 9 to do so, which he failed, but we'll say he rolled a 9, and then he would make an attack, which as I said, I'll explain in the shooting phase. Finally, spellcasters can also cast spells from a scroll. The spell will automatically cast and counts as rolling a 14 for the purposes of spell resistance. Obviously, if it's not anything that's going to affect your opponents, they don't really need to worry, but if it is, it's a 14. Alright, let's talk combat. So combat's a bit like the Lord of the Rings game. You move into combat, and if you have an action, you may start combat. It's pretty straightforward. Let's have Araxis and our knight friend here have a fight. Alright, they both roll their d20s here, and what ends up happening is that they add their fight value to it, which they're both 4 in this particular scenario, and whoever rolls the highest wins, and then the loser subtracts his armor from the winner's roll, including the bonus. So in this case, it's 16 versus a 11. He does 16 points of damage. Our buddy Araxis here has an armor of 12, which means he takes 4 points of damage. So that one's pretty straightforward. But let's say, for example, Araxis ends up in this combat with this demon here. Well, the demon only has +3, so if we roll these again, we'll see here that Araxis very clearly beats the demon, 14 to 3. But let's just say that they rolled the same, 14 to 14. Well, Araxis still wins because he gets +4 to his fight value. So that means Araxis is an 18, the demon is 11 armor, so he takes 7 points of damage. But Araxis is also wielding a two-handed weapon, so he adds another 2 on top of that. So the guy actually takes 9 points of damage instead. Now, once the combat is over, the winner gets to pick one of 2 options. They can either stay locked in close combat for however long it is until one of them decides not to be in combat anymore. The other thing you can do is you can push your opponent back 1 inch, and that's basically how combat works. Now, there is a caveat, of course, in close combat, and that is sometimes you may end up in combat with multiple people. How the hell does this work? Well, pretty much, generally what you try and do is you sort of try and separate them out. Can they be separated into multiple combats? Not really. So what ends up happening is that our demon friend here is supporting our knight, and he gets a +2 bonus now against our friend Araxis here. So he rolls his dice, he gets an 11, Araxis rolls 17, so it doesn't matter, but let's say Araxis rolled a 13. So right now, he's beating them by 2, but actually the demon adds +2, so it ends up a draw. And what happens during draws? Everyone stays where they are. No one won. No damage is dealt. No one is pushed back. Now, if our skeleton friend comes in here and tries to help out, well, the combat is still one-on-one in this scenario. Attacker picks one of the defenders, and the defender you know, he defends, basically. Now, in this scenario, you might think, oh, does this mean you both get +2? No, the skeleton and the demon will cancel each other out in this fight. But obviously, the more you add in, you get your +2 back at this one, and then if we put another skeleton over here, they're now getting +4 in close combat. Now, the losers will still get pushed back when lost. So it's one big pile in, basically. Now, shooting is of course, the other facet to close combat here. So let's take our friend, the Tracker, here. And we'll put him up against this Skelly boy. He's not liking this Skelly boy. He's a big old jerk. So pretty much, this is how it rolls. The skeleton and the archer roll. Now, of course, these would be rolled by separate players. We'll say this is the skeleton and 9 is the archer. Now, the archer's hitting, of course, which is great. He adds his shoot value of 2 to the dice roll. Now, sadly, the skeleton's defense is 11, so it deals no damage, but it does hit. So, otherwise, it misses. Now, the other facet of shooting is maybe one of your guys is in close combat. So, if you decide to shoot at this point, first you have to roll to see who you're hitting. So, you do this randomly. So, actually, we'll use a d6 just for ease of use. So, we'll go odds, I hit my own guy, evens, I hit the enemy. So in this case, I would be hitting my own guy, and I have to roll both dice and hope that my archer does a really bad job, which he did not this time. And that's how shooting in close combat works. Now, attacking spells, of course, follow the same kind of rules. Let's get Necros back for this one. Necros comes in, he goes, I'm going to cast Bone Dart, and we'll say he's successful. So, of course, our archer friend here rolls his defensive roll, which are... And he doesn't succeed, because his defensive roll adds his fight, which is 2 for the defense, and Necros adds 5, because that's what Bone Dart does. So Bone Dart strikes home and does a whopping 7 points of damage to our poacher here, who only has 10 points of health, so, you know, it could be dangerous. And also, the other thing to keep in mind is that for some of these spells... they can get really dangerous. For example, Poison Dart with Poison can be really nasty. Poison reduces your guy to 1 action until they are healed, which can only be done by certain spells and potions or leaving the game. So getting poisoned can be really nasty stuff. Have you been traveling through the city of Felstad by yourself? Well, the good news is that you can join Count Vamps on his journey by liking and subscribing, and if you have access to it, think about hyping the video. I know I would. So how the hell do you win, right? Like, we're at this point, we've got all our combats and all that kind of crap. Is it just brutalize the enemy? No. We've got to get treasure. And of course, treasure is picked up by simply moving into it and grabbing it, as previously said. Now, if there is an enemy within an inch, you can't grab it. You have to get them away. You have to shoo them away like a fart, you know. Bye-bye. And once you manage to do that, you can then pick the treasure up and move it off the board. So you simply move it off the board by having the treasure, and then bye-bye. I'm off the board now. That treasure's mine. Of course, there is also scenarios with scenario objectives that normally give experience, which we will cover experience and treasure and all that fancy stuff in our next section. But that's pretty much how you win. You complete the objectives, you cast spells, you fail spells, you succeed at spells, you take out enemies, you take out random, you know, NPC monsters, get rid of those jerks, and you get the treasure off the table. And then once all 5 treasure markers are off the table, I mean, you can hang around and brutalize each other all you want, but you're really not getting much out of it. So that's pretty much how the game comes to an end. So you got off the board, and hopefully you're not too bloodied, with some treasure, of course. So first things first, you checked if any of you guys got wounded. Pretty straightforward stuff. Yeah, well, not this guy, but... one of you guys gets murdered on the board. What do? Well, you roll a dice. And for these guys, anything that's a 1 or a 2 is bad. They're dead. Dead Ivan Dedinskis. Completely screwed. Now, anything between a 3 and a 9, they are wounded and they must spend the next game out. Depending on what they are, you may just fire them and hire new ones. Like, for example, this skeleton is just a thug. I'm not going to lose sleep over it if he can't be in the next game. He gets kicked out into the snow and I find a new skeleton. If it's a more important member, say like one of your knights or something like that, then you might just have to deal without him for the game. Anything above a 10, and you're golden with these dudes. Now, wizards and apprentices have a slightly different thing. A 1 and a 2 is still bad news for them, but a 3 to a 6 is that they get a permanent injury, which can range from a broken nose, some missing teeth, maybe a missing finger or an arm or a leg. You know, something along the lines of that, depending on how badly they get messed up. For the most part, of course, generally your wizard will be fine to take these. Your apprentice, you see how good your apprentice is at the time. For the next one, we have obviously 7 to 9. And basically what happens on this one is they lose all their special equipment. They can instantly replace any standard equipment that they lost. So what they got at the start for free, that's fine. They just, send out an envoy, get some from one of the local villages. But obviously they can't replace any magic items like that, otherwise they wouldn't be in Felstad to begin with, basically. Of course, anything above a 10, as per usual, these guys are fine. Is he alright? Do you think he's alright?
Zug doesn't know.
Okay, just wait, let me kick him. Oh, yeah, no, he's groaned, he's alive.
Zug thinks that fight was crazy.
Yeah, I mean, that was crazy. Did you see that necromancer guy? That dude was crazy. And then that big skeleton with the huge axe. I don't want to get anywhere near that guy. Did you see him? He absolutely eviscerated like 3 of our guys. Yeah, that's insane. Do you think we should just leave him?
Zug thinks we should probably let him pass.
I suppose so. Alright, well, I'm not picking him up. I'm just going to drag him by his legs.
Zug thinks brain damage.
He'll be fine. He survived whatever the hell happened to him. A few hits to the head with rocks will be no problem for that guy. Alright, so once you've done that, you work out the XP you're getting, which is generally roughly 50 to 80 XP for the objectives of the scenario. You get 40 for having your wizard in the game. You get 5 XP for failed spells, 10 XP for success ones. Any kills, you get 5 experience as well. And finally, you get 40 per treasure. So preferably you want to be getting at least 3 of them, really. Now that being said, even if you pilfer all the treasure, your wizard can gain no more than 300 XP per game, with some exceptions. Now, each level is 100 XP, and you can do 3 things with levels, basically. Number 1, you can improve a stat by 1. Not armor, though. But you can include any of the base stats by 1. Each one has a maximum. Generally, it's 5 for everything that isn't health, and I believe it might be 10 for will. So I think it's 10 for will, 20 for health, and then 5 for your other stats. You only get 1 stat point per game, basically. So you can't stat up twice, even if they're different stats. Secondly, you can learn a spell from a grimoire. If you have a grimoire, you can just learn the spell, and it just follows the standard rules for learning a spell. And then finally, 3, you can improve the casting of 1 spell by 1. So if you say you need a 14 to brew potion, you can make that a 13, and so on and so forth. And also at the end of your first game, you get the fun thing of picking a home base, which can give you different bonuses. These range from inns to vaults to libraries to even a crypt, if you're so inclined. You can also buy upgrades for your home base, improving your out-of-game spells, getting units for cheaper, and even having extra space for warhounds. These are permanent upgrades to your home base, so they can be pretty good, but they are, of course, expensive. Then, finally, once that's all done, you take your treasure tokens, and for each one you roll a d20, and it'll tell you what you get on the table. A 10. I'm pretty sure that is gold and some potions from memory. Now, I could, of course, show what the loot table is, but I think I'll leave that as a surprise for those who buy the game. Now, I'll cover grimoires, of course. So grimoires, every other item can be bought, even the specialty ones. But you obviously have to pay money for them. But grimoires are not part of the things you can buy. That includes scrolls as well. No, they must be found and can only be learnt from. So you have to pry them from the cold dead hands of the frosted wizards that you find in your wake. Hey guys, Present Vams here. I just wanted to let you know that I was wrong in this particular section. You can buy spells and scrolls. So you can buy a grimoire for 500 gold coins, and it's whatever you want, and you can buy a scroll for 250. So it's still not cheap, but you can do it. Now these of course are very powerful and great, but maybe you get one that you can't learn. For example, Greg the Sigilist picks up a summoner book and goes, what do I want with this? Well, you can sell it for 200 GP. You can also sell scrolls for 50. So, not the greatest monetary gain, but if you can't learn the spell anyway, you know, go nuts. Or maybe you can sell them to one of your rival wizards. We occasionally do that. In fact, my son owes me 200 gold pieces. Not for a grimoire, though, for a hammer for one of his constructs. So, yeah, he owes me money. Where's my money, Denny?
I'm gonna ask you again, Denny. Where's my money?
Now, once you've got your treasure and gone shopping, you can also, of course, recruit new team members and cast any out-of-game spells you might have. For example, our witch friend Saphira has the ability to cast Brew Potion. So she rolls her dice, she needs a 12, I rolled a 14, fantastic. So that means she can now brew a... Now, she can choose... So basically, she goes to the potion list and she can pick any one of them. Now, she can, of course, choose to risk it all and brew a greater potion, which would be 4 more difficulty. Now, her brew potion is 12, so sadly, that would have been a fail if she tried to brew a more advanced potion. And in fact, many things are like this in the game, where you can choose to cast a more advanced version of the spell and eat it if you can't do it. Not every spell has it, but a lot of them do. You can also write scrolls, which writing scrolls is you just pick one of your own spells and you write a scroll of it, and then you may use it freely. Necros, in fact, carries a scroll of teleport to get the hell out of dodge if something goes horribly wrong. And, you know, the last thing you want is to be, please roll a 14, I've got like 2 hit points left. And then you're like, oh wait, no, I can just use a scroll and phew, out I go, I'm gone, you guys are left to die. Now, of course, these out-of-game spells can only be cast once per out-of-game. Each one can be cast once though, so if you've got Construct, you know, Write Scroll and Brew Potion, you can cast all 3 of them, but only once. They cannot be empowered, and they cannot cause damage to your wizard if they flub the roll badly enough. Okay, so Frostgrave is a very fun game. Honestly, it is. Once again, rolling damage and attack rolls into one set of rolls is just brilliant. It saves so much time. Like, I'm a big fan of anything that saves time in a war game, because I think that's one of the biggest, you know, parts of a war game. It's very time consuming, and if you can fit extra games in because things are quick, awesome. As long as they're still good, of course. Now, I'm also a big fan of the combat system in this game. You know, you're locked in until you win. You make opposing rolls, which means people are always active in the game. I always love when games make things more active rather than sort of just, it's your turn, buddy, and then, you know, sit down and scroll your phone or whatever. In this way, they have to actually take a proactive stance on how they approach things. And I think one of the best things is you get attached to these guys. You really do. Araxis, for example, is one of my favorite guys. He's brilliant. The dude was very much undefeatable for a long time. He was a monster. He rarely loses a fight. He deals huge damage. He'd normally just take dudes out in one shot. And he's got a bit of a reputation. And just the other day, my son managed to overcome him. He managed to beat him and cause him to leave the field. And I got unreasonably upset over the fact that this happened, because it was kind of like his mystique, his dread aura on the battlefield got a bit dinted at that point. And it got to the point that, well, I obviously didn't yell or anything, but I started brutalizing his army deliberately to get vengeance. No one takes Araxis out, and by the time the game ended, he only had 3 dudes left in his thing. He had to roll 7 saves. Now, he did pass pretty much all of them. He did lose one of his lower level guys that he just replaced. But otherwise, everyone actually made it through relatively unscathed, including my own couple of guys. Well, actually, one of my thugs died, but I don't care about them. And, you know, that's just my guy. You know, my partner's team is known to be a swift, no-nonsense treasure hunting group, you know, going straight for those objectives, all about speed. Most of her people have 7 speed, so they're very quickly able to grab those treasures and get off the board. And, you know, she prefers to avoid fighting, only fighting when necessary. While Kid Vamps' wizard is known as this erratic, unpredictable one turn tripping over himself, and the other turn, you know, casting a ridiculous spell or taking an objective marker that you weren't ready for, like taking one of the treasure tokens right out from underneath your nose. And, you know, he's got a lot of, like, creatures on his side. He's got 2 constructs and he's got a demon, you know, so most of his permanent team members are, like, crazy sort of dudes. And not to mention, he could fill his whole army with constructs. I mean, that's doable, which I think he's aiming for. So, for example, we've got Haunter here. Where's Haunter? We got Haunter here. He's not quite ready yet. He's getting painted. But this is another construct to go with Gengar. So that's pretty cool. I think he is going to try and get a Ghastly one and a couple others. So he's going to keep trying to make better constructs. But it's all... And speaking of which, it's also super fast. Like, you can crank a game out in an hour pretty easily. The scenarios are all really unique. There's 20 different scenarios. And of course, you can always make scenarios up. But thanks to this, a lot of the games feel very different. You know, one game you could be, you know, fighting a giant worm that appears near one of the treasures. The next game you could be climbing up a ziggurat with a statue that shoots lasers at you. And then the game after that, you could be in a forbidden library where the bookshelves make up corridors and you're all really cramped in. You don't have a lot of room to maneuver. And the magic system is also fantastic. I absolutely love it. It's very straightforward. You know, you need to roll a number, beat a number, bang, done. But also, each spell feels very different. Even the dart spells feel different. Bone Dart is different from Elemental Dart, and which is once again different from Poison Dart. And they pretty much run the same way, but they're slightly different and do slightly different things, which is awesome. And then you've got really cool control spells like Fog, which puts down a wall of fog on the battlefield. You can move through it, you can fight in it, but you can't shoot through it. So that's pretty cool. There's also a really nice Chronomancer spell called Crumble, which literally just lets you crumble the wall of a piece of terrain and move through it as though it was just a door. And then you can also stop crumbling, and if someone's trapped in a wall, they basically get killed that way. So, you know, that's some really cool stuff. Now, that being said, with all the praise I just heaped on this game, I've heard the criticism from a few people that the game is very swingy because of the large variation in the D20 in comparison to other war games that use D6s or D10s. And I have to say, yeah, I don't really have a good argument here. If one player gets a good set of rolls, suddenly you're in a really bad spot and there's not much you can do about it. And then on the same point, you know, it could be 2 turns later and then suddenly you're rolling like a madman and your opponent's suddenly way on the back foot. So, but it can sometimes swing so far in one person's favor that it's near impossible to get back. There was one particular game I played with my son, and I wasn't trying to really do anything, but I managed to take out like 4 or 5 of his guys, and he'd also moved 2 of his other guys off the board to get treasure away, and he just didn't have enough manpower to basically contest the third treasure token that he'd want, so I got off the board with 3 treasure tokens. So it can be a really crazy mix. And also, that's not even mentioning the possibility of your wizard or apprentice getting taken out early in the game, because if you lose them, you don't get those phases anymore. So if you know, your apprentice gets taken out, you don't have an apprentice phase anymore, but your opponent may. And you'd be surprised at just how much of a difference that made. There was one game where my kid he got his wizard off the board with a treasure, I took out his apprentice, and he only had a soldier phase. Now, that did mean he got to move 7 guys, but it meant that I got to move my wizard and, you know, do up to 3 dudes near him, and then my apprentice got a turn, up to 3 dudes around him, and then his soldiers got a turn, then my soldiers got a turn. He won initiative, just for the record, but he had no wizard, he had no apprentice. So, you know, that can be a sticky wicket if you end up just getting sort of totaled in that way. and that also means that your wizard and your apprentice have big targets on them. That being said, it's overall still a very enjoyable game, and if you're ready for the swings, like you're prepared that this is going to happen, I don't think it's going to bother you too much. So Frostgrave is a fun, narrative-based skirmish war game. And honestly, I really enjoyed making teams and painting them for this game. Like, I painted a lot of miniatures for this one. Getting to go up against another person's team is really great because you can sort of tell this story about it. Like, you know, Necros, for example, his guys legally aren't undead, as in they don't count as undead miniatures. So I came up with a theory behind it. Basically, Necros is a really powerful lich, right? And he's able to cast special undead, but he's only able to have a certain number of them. These undead don't count as regular undead, so they can't be controlled or destroyed by normal means. And that's why, you know, they don't count as undead in the game, because he's got special undead that he came up with. That also explains why he can still summon zombies and stealth spirits, but they don't get their special protection because they're not the special undead that he made. So it's really fun to sort of be able to, yeah, you know, stretch that out and come up with a cool story with the other person. Now, as a war game, it's still good even if you don't like the narrative side of things, of course. I honestly highly recommend giving Frostgrave a try, because it's brilliant. Anyway, that's all for me for today. I appreciate you watching, and I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you on the next video.